This landscape rewards curiosity. The trick is knowing how to look. From the dizzying heights of an orbiting spacecraft, all the way down through the lens of a microscope. In a sense, there's a magic trick being performed right before your eyes. Everything we see out here is just the tip of the iceberg.
Hi, I'm Ben and welcome to the 3-year anniversary episode of Field Foley. Today we have a rare treat for you as I get to speak to 3 lovely people that made something truly wonderful. We are speaking about Life Unearthed with Ariel Waldman, Edith Mudge and Nathan Moody. Ariel Waldman is an explorer and filmmaker. Her expeditions take her from tallgrass prairies and deep-sea canyons to the icy realms of Antarctica. In these remarkable places, she films otherworldly life beneath the surface, including the extraordinary lives of microscopic animals. Ariel is the creator and host of Life Unearthed, the documentary we are all speaking about today. Ariel is also National Geographic Explorer, TED speaker, and author. She has also served as an advisor to NASA on astrobiology, human spaceflight, and advanced technologies. So first of all, Ariel, thank you for being in the show and welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And next we have Edith Mudge. She is a composer, orchestrator, and music editor based in Los Angeles. Her portfolio spans a wide variety of genres that converge at her love of live instrumentation, synth programming, teamwork, and attention to detail. In addition to composing all the music for Life Unearthed, she orchestrated and produced the score's live recordings in Los Angeles and Europe. Hello, Edith. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And last but not least, we have Nathan Moody, the supervising sound editor who works as a freelancer as well through Skywalker Sound. He has been on the show before, so people from early days of Field Foley might know him. And he's worked on blockbuster feature films, award-winning documentaries, and award-winning games for AAA studios and indie developers alike. And he handled all the sound design, editing, and mixing duties on Life Unearthed. Hello, Moody.
Hey, good to be back.
So yeah, first of all, let me say I really, really enjoyed the series. It was wonderful. It had so many beautiful moments. And the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, man, this is really high quality production to a level that I didn't expect from such a small team. It felt perfect. It felt like these kind of documentaries where you hear like, oh, they spent months and months somewhere with a camera crew and 50 people or something. So yeah, my first question would be to you, Ariel. You had the vision for this, but what made you want to embark on the journey to Antarctica alone? Because that's kind of amazing.
I mean, it's a lot. I would have loved to have a crew of 50. That would have been awesome. I would have absolutely said yes to that. But part of the reason is, I was embedded on this research team in Antarctica, and it's a really remote and protected area. And so I wasn't able to bring anyone with me. I wasn't allowed to have an assistant. I wasn't allowed to have a film crew. And so the only way I could film a nature documentary in the dry valleys of Antarctica where I was to film it by myself over 2 months while I was there. So I would have loved to have help, but I had to go it alone. And it was my first documentary, so it was definitely a big challenge. But and I didn't know if I was going to be able to pull it off, but thankfully I did.
Amazing. And I've heard you also had a handheld recorder with you. And so, of course, I'm interested. Like, did you have like plans beforehand how to use it, or was it just more like okay, I'm going to just try and get whatever I can?
It was mostly just trying and seeing what I could get. I had looked up like what would be the best, environmental recorder. And I found, there was this Sony device that, is no longer made. And so I was like, well, okay, I'll buy that and I'll see what I can do and see what I can record. And I would have liked to have a little bit more training on it, but, it was also fun just to set it up like on the side of like a frozen lake and all these different locations and sort of see what ambient sounds I could get.
And what worked really well and what didn't work out in the field? What was your like first experience with that?
I mean, the most challenging thing is that being a filmmaker in Antarctica, I think, is the coldest job you can have. So I was with a bunch of colleagues, and they would go out on these physically demanding days where, they'd be hiking 10 plus miles a day, going up glaciers, really tough stuff. I wasn't hiking for 10 miles, but my job was to go out, by myself with all my camera equipment and set it up in freezing cold temperatures, which would take me about 30 minutes, and then film myself talking to camera. And it would be about 30 minutes. I'm setting up all my stuff and then I'm sitting still, not moving, just talking to camera for 30 minutes. And around 30 minutes in, I would have to stop filming because I could feel my cheeks beginning to sort of freeze and I would begin slurring my words and I couldn't enunciate because my face was too frozen to enunciate words on camera. So I definitely had like the coldest job because I wasn't moving very much.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I can imagine. I really like to go ice bathing and also like go to intentional cold exposure. So I know like whenever you don't move, it gets cold really fast and it has all sorts of weird things that can happen with your body. So, I didn't even think about like all the setup as well. It was, while I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, they're just filmed here. And after a while, I was like, no, she did it all by herself. Like she brought this stuff up and then had to position it. And yeah, it's just so crazy. But let's go over to Edith next because I want to also talk about the soundtrack. And first of all, like it was a wonderful, wonderful soundtrack. I really felt amazed at by varied it was and how it was like had these different themes and feelings, even for single episodes, like mixing styles and everything. So my first question would be to you: what was your approach first for going in the series? What was your first thought process of doing the soundtrack?
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. I really have to credit Ariel here for knowing the genre, wanting to give me ideas of things that worked, and for being just really collaborative about the music. I feel like we came up with something really interesting together, and she would give me an idea of like, we want Blood Falls to feel like a murder mystery, or we want these tardigrades to feel really delightful. Like this is the part that the children are going to be oohing and ahhing at. And so we had a lot of conversations around that, around what each of these episodes and scenes were going to be evoking. So I also, one of the challenges I think was that the palette shift from Antarctica to the prairies part of the documentary, we wanted to evoke the cold loneliness of being a solo filmmaker in Antarctica and the teeming life there. And I remember prairies having a little bit more of a jungle vibe. And so that was really fun to work with. I mean, it's just been really cool.
Yeah, I've also heard that you used like the orders of magnitude to inform the instrumentation. So you based it on like the very small, just like you said, the tardigrades with the delicateness. And just for the record, I was also oohing and ahhing because they're just
we
so
all
cute.
do.
They are amazing. So did you like, what was your plan then for the music? Did you like kind of set up different tiers of magnitude as well, and then try to mix that into your transitions as well, or was that just going scene by scene?
It was a little bit of both. We initially wanted all of the microscopic scenes to really feel like the classic Serengeti nature documentary feel, but there were a few moments that felt the instrumentation was a little overwhelming or a little too weird. And so finding the happy medium there was key, with having them be cute and weird, but also grand and having their own big story that we were telling. So I did want the outer space scenes to feel grand, but in a smaller instrumentation almost. Like we did some guitars and some high strings in the space sections, but looking down on Earth, we wanted to evoke that awe, and at the human level, it could get a little bit more emotional. And then it was really kind of an exploration scene to scene with what every other animal was feeling at every different scale. So it was intentional, but it was an exploration.
Yeah, and also then later on, something that Nathan also wants to know is, what was it like for you then to submit all these music cues and then hear the final mix? Did you have like any surprises, anything where something unexpected happened for you, or was it all like you've laid it out?
I mean, everything is a learning experience, right? So I'm not a Foley and audio person, really, and not up on a lot of my mixing skills, but I felt like the mix worked really incredibly. And I would say the surprises that I've had have been like remembering that there will be Foley and sounds throughout the cues, and the mix needs to reflect that. And so going forward, I would leave a little bit more intentional room for some of those things, because I'm sure that was probably a challenge for Nathan to figure out where extra interest was needed and where it wouldn't be interrupting the flow too much.
Yeah, maybe we can give the question already over to Nathan. Yeah, what was your view on that?
Well, I think what really set us up for success was the first time that Ariel and I did a spotting session, going through the whole film and talking about push and pull between narration, dialogue, sound effects, Foley, score. And I think the whole success of the show lies in Ariel having a very clear vision for what she wanted. There's nothing, to me, less conducive to the creative experience on a project where the creative stakeholder doesn't have that vision and is uncertain about what success sounds like. And Ariel came in with this very crisp, well-articulated set of expectations that just makes our job so much easier, because then it's like, okay, cool, these are the boundaries. Now the possibility space is so much smaller, and it's so much easier to make a bunch of decisions within that. I also think that the music was pretty easy to work with. We utilized some techniques that I picked up from the game industry, like rather than just side chaining and ducking the music with volume, doing that with EQ as well. And specifically doing that to clear out space for on-screen dialogue or pieces to camera, in-studio spoken narration. And then I think pretty quickly we arrived at this house style of deciding that microscopy would have no sound effects and those would entirely be carried by music, which I think was really important because
absolutely, yeah,
the music doesn't anthropomorphize the microscopic creatures, but it gives a sense of activity and life. And if we ever tried to put sound design over that stuff, it would feel cartoony and take people out of the experience in terms of calling attention to itself. So I think that those coming up with those pillars and those very high level, like here's the sonic architecture of an episode and the season, I think was really important for our success.
Yeah. And I will add there that Ariel and I we had ongoing spotting sessions. I don't know how you take so many meetings, Ariel.
This is the job.
Multiple spotting sessions, between me and Nathan. But we were also very intentional about like, this is going to be Nathan's moment, and make sure that the music goes out here so that we have a really wonderful soundscape that we can fade into, and this is Nathan, and then this is Edith, and then working them together just seems like a real challenge. And it seems like, I mean, you did it beautifully. Those are really interesting techniques.
The one moment that I thought was really nice where music didn't make space for me, it made space for Ariel, was in the third episode where Ariel finally sits down on a rock, looks at the camera, and just fesses up as to how uncomfortable she is and how brutally cold this particular day is. And just everything goes away. You know, yes, there's some sound and some Foley and stuff, but it was like, that was Ariel's moment to really convey herself in the moment rather than conveying the science, that happened beforehand. And to me, that's still one of my favorite sequences of the whole series. It's quiet. It fesses up to the difficulties being faced. And I think that puts just such a human face on the conveying of science communication. And that's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, that's also something that I really enjoyed, the kind of feeling that there's someone with passion there telling their story, and it's not a production of something and someone plays the part of the moderator or the host. It was really it felt to me really like, that's why I said when we started this call, like, oh, I already saw you, I already kind of know you. It feels like watching like an old friend after some time, because it was very, I don't know, just very personal and direct. So I really like that approach as well. Yeah, and then speaking of sounds, while we're on the topic, Nathan, I have a note here that I wanted to ask you. There is this wonderful sound in episode 5, Life in Water, the sand boil. And I wanted to ask, like, did you make that? Was that a recording? Or because that sounds just so wonderful, bubbly, and I'd like to know how that was made.
That's a great call out and a great example of the push and pull between production and post-production and lived reality versus film reality. So Ariel is the only director I've ever worked with who owns a Sony D100. And when I found that out, I was just so thrilled. And so she did a lot of recordings for reference for us. For the Prairies episodes, I went on location a month after they did, because I didn't want to have a film crew polluting the recordings. We still wanted to make sure that we were species accurate to time of year, and all of those concerns. So I got some recordings of the sand boil, and it's like, well, there's some bubbles, and you can hear it every once in a while, but most of what you hear is just the break of the surface tension when a bubble pops, is mostly what you hear, and it makes a very cute, like, bloink. And so I went and I did a bunch of recordings of that exact same sand boil and got almost nothing usable. It was a quiet day. It was having an introspective moment, I think, when I visited, and I got a couple of little blips, but it wasn't really that exciting. Then, of course, you have the filmic reality of the fact that there's been a lot of footage shot, and it's edited together into this tight little montage. So rather than putting a mic on a sand boil for 4 hours and hoping for magic, I had enough of the real recordings of the bubbles popping and water moving to then go back into my library and find really, really closely matching material to fill in the gaps where we didn't have quite enough production or field recording to make that work. So I'm glad that was evocative. We wanted to keep it kind of subtle because sand boils are not loud. I think that's the only time in my entire life I've realized, oh, this is like quicksand. I thought quicksand was a way bigger problem in the world growing up on Looney Tunes cartoons. But it was such a joy to see and witness and hear this fascinating kind of weird geographic burp of the earth that only happens where humans haven't raised or tilled farmland. So that was just a neat, really niche, unique experience.
Yeah, for people listening who don't know what a sand boil is, it's essentially like water that gets trapped underneath sandstone, and then that the water kind of makes its way to the surface, and as it comes up to the surface, it's taking little pieces of sand with it to the surface, and then so you get this sort of thing that looks like boiling water, but it's boiling sand essentially, and it's a really strange looking thing, but it is also very subtle. And so it was a thing that, we did want to try to showcase in both sound and visuals, because we sort of knew that, most people won't be able to see a sand boil because they are kind of in these fragile, protected ecosystems.
Yeah, I really liked the choice as well because I was, Nathan, while I was watching it, I was expecting it to be way lower in volume in the real life. Just from the visuals, I was like, probably it wasn't that loud, but I liked it because that is an artistic choice that makes total sense to me, because just like you just mentioned, Ariel, in the beginning you mentioned like this immense pressure pushing this out. So you have this kind of setup of these natural forces, and that sound in that instance and gives it like underlines just this fact that this is like it's not just a little bubbly sand. It's like there's actual deep pressure pushing sand out, and it's a real force of nature. So I really like that kind of choice. And maybe on that point, any other things that you intentionally changed or needed to make louder or lower in volume for the series?
Macro shots are always tricky because, especially when you start to develop a sonic language for a show, that basically is that anytime we see an animal on screen, we probably should hear that animal. And that works for wide shots, it works for medium shots. But then when you get into like insect macros and stuff like that, suddenly when those things don't make noise, it's cognitively dissonant. And so you have to make these decisions about, how do we maybe not figure out a way to record a firefly taking off in flight. That's literally silent. But if we've got a macro shot and it's taking up 3/4 of the frame and you don't hear anything, that's also strange. So we had to do some magic around flying cicadas, for example, where when they stridulate, they're unbelievably loud. But when they fly, they're not really that loud. But we had a bunch of really tight shots where we did some stuff with playing cards and black beetle wings and stuff like that, just to kind of fill those gaps. But there was one episode featuring a hyperactive wood rat, and this wood rat and I became mortal enemies on this show because it moved so fast, and and we tried to do a whole bunch of different approaches with Foley, and it was maybe actually Ariel can speak to how that footage was captured and why it didn't have sound.
I mean, it had a little bit of sound, but not good sound. So it's like essentially we went out and we were working with a researcher who specialized in rodents, Dr. Andrew Hope at Kansas State University, and he found a bunch of trail cameras in the university, and he's like, "Oh, I could go set these up, where a bunch of different rodents are." And we were like, that would be great. That would be awesome. But none of us, unfortunately, had experience with trail cams. And so he just put them up randomly around, where he saw sort of some rodent activity. And so we had hours of footage of rodents and deers and possums and all sorts of things. But of course, because we weren't well experienced, there was a lot of scenes where it was very clear something really awesome was happening and it was just out of reach of the frame, and I was like, something really cool is happening off camera. But we did get this one sequence of this wood rat just running back and forth all night, moving twigs, to build its nest. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, we can actually make that one of the characters and build a scene around it and everything. But yeah, I mean, these are really low res, low tech, trail cams, so just really grainy black and white stuff. The audio is nothing good. So yeah, I unknowingly gave Nathan quite the task to build a soundscape around this wood rat. But yeah, you just see this wood rat like all night just running back and forth with different twigs building this nest. As the air cools and the prairie grows silent, a tiny architect emerges from the grasses. This eastern wood rat waits for the cover of darkness before venturing out, carefully gathering twigs and dried stems to build its nest. The nest needs a lot of twigs.
Yeah.
I enlisted the help for that specific shot. Definitely hired a Foley artist named Tom Reese to help with that. And we covered it 10 ways to Sunday. And finally in the mix, we're just like, let's only cover when the wood rat jumps, takeoffs and lands, and interactions of these twigs, because that's where the humor in the scene comes from. This tiny little thing's carrying these monstrous twigs that are 5 times longer than its body, and it's very awkward. And so finally, once we started to peel away a bunch of layers, because Edith Score was doing some really fun, lighthearted stuff with this scene, we just realized just big impacts. That's all we're going to cover. And then all of a sudden, just the veil was lifted and it really simplified everything.
I do feel like that's one of my favorite cues from the series, just getting to go full cute, getting to do these repeated measured tremolos in the woodwinds, and just run around being a busy guy.
Yeah. I think it was like also initially like a struggle, not only for sound, but also for music. Because Edith, I remember you and I went back and forth on that one, trying to figure out like, what is the right, like, it needs to be fun, but not like, it's always managing that, like, what sounds over the top, which then like pulls it too much into cartoon territory. And that, I remember that cue, we were like going back and forth on that a lot.
Yeah, no, that was definitely, it was a challenge, because there's what you are told is like a funny palette, or like a cute palette for music, and then there's what actually sells the scene. And so it took us a little while to get there, but beauty of collaboration.
Indeed. And coming back to you, Ariel, maybe before this all went into post-production, what were your expectations for how music and sound would then shape the series? What was your goal there?
I mean, I just have to say how thankful I am that both Edith and Nathan came into my life because, being a pretty new filmmaker, I valued sound and music, but I didn't really know like just how deep my value of it was until I started working with both of them. I've been wowed both by, Edith's music and Nathan's sound. Like it really has fundamentally changed it. And now, I don't know. I think, I admittedly, again, being a completely new filmmaker, before Nathan got on board with the project, I was like, okay, yeah, we need some sound and some sound mixing. Cool, whatever. Like I totally admit to that. Like I just did not know how transformative it was without going through the process. And then I was like, this is like incredible and amazing. And then yeah, music equally. There's so many times where I come to Edith and I'm like, okay, so this scene is really strong and we just need a subtle touch with music. But there's many other scenes where I come to Edith and I'm like, so the footage isn't really holding up on its own and we really need music to like amp this up and like save this footage. So I mean, I've really come, it's been a learning process, but one of the things, that I've learned is that, you really do work as a team because there's going to be places where one of our components is feeling a little bit weak and the other side of that component, whether it be the footage side or the sound or the music or something, is able to like compensate for that and create something where, once it comes out to an audience, you're not even noticing that I thought certain parts were weaker than others and needed help from other sides. And so it's just been just a really incredible collaboration. I don't know if that answers your original question, but yeah, I've been just really excited about it.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That's wonderful to hear, and I've gotten that a lot with indie video game developers as well when they first work with me or with other sound people, that they then see like all these possibilities and see how like something they made and they've been toying over forever, but it's mostly silent, maybe some placeholder sounds, and then they get the first draft back and they're like, oh God, that's amazing. Like I didn't even know this could happen and this could happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I totally love is that Edith and Nathan had talked about like I have a vision for this and it's true, but I totally love that they challenge me and that they insert things that I didn't ask for all the time, and some of those I will still be like, no, that's not really it. But there's things that I would have never come up with, and to me, that's the joy of filmmaking and having a team. I have a vision, but I want to be challenged. I want to be expansive in the exploration of these ecosystems and what they can do and how that can be communicated to audiences. And so they've both been just wonderful in sort of keeping that balance of finding the vision, but also challenging it. And that's been just wonderful.
And every sound designer absolutely needs a director that says, no, we will not accentuate every picture cut with a sub-bass drop. Sometimes, you just need that push to keep you off of the brink of insanity.
It's been really interesting on my end to watch your process too, Nathan, because I'm just not usually like privy to that, and being on such a small and like intimate crew, like it's been really awesome to watch you like going out on expeditions and just leaving mics out, seeing what you get, or just like specifically finding the place that you need to go. I mean, this has seemed to be a whole adventure expedition for you as well.
Yeah, I think we have to shout out our production assistant Mia, who did this amazing job of helping Ariel on the shoot and then giving me like a geolocated map of here's every single place tripod sticks went down. And that allowed me to go back and really kind of like investigate and interrogate the landscape with recording to try to be as accurate as possible. Of course, one of my favorite comments about the creative process is when verisimilitude fails, accuracy is no excuse. So I could try to get like the most, and did get the most accurate soundscapes for time of day, everything. And if it doesn't play against the visuals, or it doesn't play in the narrative arc of the information or the story we're trying to tell, the fact that it's accurate doesn't matter. And so there were quite a few times where we had hours and hours and hours of completely accurate recordings, but they fought with the dialogue, or they were just too busy, or they were felt too close or too distant. And so a lot of those trade-offs really involve just what fits. And then you try to make that as accurate as possible, because no one wants to be on the receiving end of emails saying that bird species doesn't exist at that time of year in this location. And we were at least that accurate. But, we did have to push some things of like, it's a mid-morning shot, but the dawn chorus is so much richer. We'll use that. So a lot of little decisions to kind of amp up the soundscape to keep the audience engaged. Because when we're talking about narrative, we want them to be engaged, to engage suspension of disbelief. And when we're talking about documentaries, we need to keep them engaged in order to ease the flow of information delivery and learning that happens during a documentary.
Yeah, and I mean, I should mention also like what our production crew was in the prairies versus Antarctica. So in Antarctica, it was just me alone. And then in the prairies on production, it was myself, our DP, Gunther Kirsch, production assistant, Mia Meadows-Berger, and then a couple of science advisors and co-producers. So that was Dr. Wes Swingley and Dr. Lydia Zeglin. And so, yeah, we were oftentimes like on production, like a crew of 4 or 5 people. So that was the whole out in the prairies crew.
Yeah, and maybe for future shoots as well, what's your takeaway from that first exploration with your Sony recorder? Will you take him with you again, or rather have someone with sound on location?
I mean, both. So, one of the ways I'm able to be here today is because I know how to do a lot of scrappy filmmaking and work with a very, very tiny budget that would shock a lot of people in the film industry. And so, that requires, being able to wear a lot of hats and being able to go out with a recorder and everything. But that said, like I was saying with Antarctica, is if someone offered me a film crew of 50 to go to Antarctica, I'd say, hell yeah. And equally, if I get a budget where I can afford, actually having a sound team out there with me, hell yes, I want that. That would be amazing. But it's a difficult time in film. It's a difficult time in science. And so a lot of times I'm up against a situation where I have to ask myself if I'm going to let a budget keep me from doing what I want to do. And for the most part, I reject that, even though it brings a lot of challenges with it. And so, if I have to do season 2 with my own little Sony recorder on my own and Nathan just advising me from afar, then I'm going to do that. But if I can actually have money to bring more sound crew with me, bring Nathan out into the field with me, then I will absolutely do that, because I love it. And I think only good stuff will come from it. So, I don't think I have a huge sense of pride about being scrappy. It's really been about necessity. And, I'm always hopeful that, maybe we will find funders or things that allow us to expand a little bit and also be able to just breathe a little bit, because we are all doing a lot as a small team. So yeah.
Yeah, and maybe on the topic of recording, because I asked this all my guests, so I'm gonna look forward to hear a non-audio person's answer to this. And the question that I ask all my guests is, what is the first sound you ever recorded, and why did you record it? So
I think when I was in Antarctica, the first sound that I put my recorder up to was at the height of summer in Antarctica. A great summer day will be 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, just at that freezing threshold. And when that happens, what you can hear is from a distance, you can hear glaciers sort of like deeply cracking. And then a few minutes later, you hear just a rush of glacier water coming off. And so I think the first thing I did was there was a creek of glacier water coming off from one of the glaciers there on one of those, barely above freezing days. And so I put the recorder right next to that creek in order to get that sound, because otherwise it is legitimately just completely silent out there. All you're ever hearing is your own footsteps everywhere, which is really kind of magical. So, but those glacier creeks, I think, are really special. And while I didn't get the glacier cracking sounds, because often they happened at times where you just don't know when it's going to happen, and I can't be right next to a glacier all day. I at least got those glacier creek sounds, which were really just special. And I think flowing water in the Antarctica is not something many people think about. And so being able to capture that sound, I think was really special.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you. And maybe going to Edith as well, because I'm also only going to forget this question otherwise. So what was your first sound you ever recorded, and why did you record it?
Yeah, I guess off the top of my head, the first one that I really paid attention to was I sampled a dulcimer for one of the first composers that I worked for. And so that was my first experience with, capturing multiple takes and cleaning up audio and making a whole virtual instrument out of that dulcimer. So that definitely got me hooked on sampling, at least.
Nice. And next we already had your answer, but maybe you have a new one. I don't know.
How about, what is the first recording I made for this project? And it was 15 years ago.
Nice.
When I really wasn't very good at field recording at that point. And I recorded a neighbor's mouse crawling around in its little terrarium. And it was all pebbles. And I was doing a shot, covering it with performed Foley for Ariel walking around the dry valleys of Antarctica, and her boot catches a rock and flips it over. And that wasn't in the surface that I had prepared to walk to. So I was kind of thinking, well, how do I deal with this? And all of a sudden, it just came to me, this crappy, objectively bad recording from 15 years ago. I just took a tiny sliver of it, and it was perfect for that rock turn as she walks through the frame. So my work on this started 15 years ago.
And that's what I love, because that scene that he's talking about where it's a very tiny little rock that just flips over. I didn't even see in the footage that I had kicked a rock until he added the sound. And then I was like, oh, that is in the footage, isn't it? And I just didn't even see it. So it's like the joy of sound. It like illuminates footage to filmmakers themselves.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and you just mentioned right now, Nathan, that it was like a crappy old recording. Do you have any other recordings? Because you were mentioning some things recorded with iPhone that made it into professional.
Yeah, so there is, to tee this up, Ariel, why don't you tell everyone what a Great Plains mud bug is?
I was hoping we were going to go here.
Oh, man, the Great Plains mud bug. Okay, so... So in the pre-production, I'm researching all these different types of wildlife in the prairies, and I learn about this creature called the Great Plains mud bug, which I just think is the most incredible name. And I'm like, and it's a crayfish. It's a crayfish that burrows in the mud instead of living in the creeks like most crayfish. And it burrows in the mud all the way down until it hits the water table, and that's how it's able to survive. And it became a bit of a nightmare production-wise, because the Great Plains mud bug does not describe multiple species of crayfish. It describes a very specific species of crayfish. And we spent so much time on production trying to get this one crayfish out of this mud hole. And we initially failed, like completely failed. Like we spent like hours on this and did not get it. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to have to just scrap all of this footage. I did pickup shots like a year later, and actually worked with a researcher who specializes in burrowing crayfish, Dusty Swedberg, in Illinois, and we finally we spent hours again. Finally found a very specific species of crayfish. I should have just made it about crayfish in general, but no, I wanted it to be the Great Plains mudbug. Anyway, it's a really cool crayfish. It ends up being in episode 5 of Life Unearthed. Yeah, but it was also a whole nother thing with the sound, which I'm sure Nathan will get into.
So Dusty and researchers of his ilk do this by literally getting up to their armpits, plunging their entire arm into these deep, deep mud holes. And it sounds, what's the word? Digestive is the word I would use.
It sounds like a toilet plunging.
It totally does.
Yeah.
And so I actually wound up using a combination of actual production recording, manipulating mud myself as a Foley pass, and it just didn't sound aggressive enough for the amount of suction that was there. And so as just a social thing among the crew, I filmed myself doing it on my iPhone and sent it to the crew saying, ha ha ha, look, I'm making a huge mess. This is fun. And then I was just like, wait a minute, what the iPhone did to the sound of me manipulating mud, it's super hyped up and really aggressively compressed and expanded. And I'm just like, would that work in the mix? And I layered it in there and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the texture that I was missing. So I just pushed my $1,000 microphone out of the way, put my iPhone on a Gorilla Pod and just recorded it that way. And so just sometimes the cheapest solution is the best solution.
To study these creatures up close, we've got to scoop them out of their burrows temporarily, which is no easy task. The burrows are so deep that researchers must submerge their entire bare arm into the mud to feel around for them. And when that fails, they use their arm to plunge the burrows to get them to come up. It's not dissimilar to the act of plunging a toilet, and it sounds like it too. Finally, after a lot of plunging, we were successful in getting to see one outside of its burrow.
Wonderful. Sometimes you keep trying at it for a long time, and then you realize, oh, I just need a really crappy microphone.
Yeah.
I've had that experience more than once, and I still get kind of surprised when it happens again. Yeah, maybe also from you, Edith, what was your lessons learned for the next time, for the next project? Maybe the collaboration with Nathan was something that you will strive for in the future as well, right? Because you can talk about the push and pull closer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Nathan and I in the future, maybe we should have a few more combined spotting sessions where I know, I mean, I will also just be paying attention more to what is happening physically in the footage. Because my instinct is to sort of follow the footage with the music and heighten the moments when movement is happening. However, with these, so much of the movement is going to be going to Nathan's work, and maybe we can have a little bit more passing of the baton. And I do think that it worked great just in this one, and in the way that everything mixed together, and lots of musical lessons learned for the next one. But yeah, I look forward to continued collaboration and continuing to learn from each other.
Same here. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Maybe one other question. You already spoke about the favorite part you made the music for, but what was the one that took you the longest to really nail down? Was it the rat, or was it?
Oh boy, the rat, and also the mudbugs. The mudbugs
Right.
took a while. I feel like there were several cues in the prairie section that it just took us a while because we weren't sure if we were going for something more Americana or something a little more jungle or desert, safari kind of music. And so once we sort of settled on that palette, I think things got a lot easier. But it took a while with several of those cues to be okay, which elements of this are working, and which ones are just making it sound like something it's not. So yeah, I think I remember the Beaver Lodge cue taking a while also.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of this was on me because, I came to Edith and I knew what I didn't want for prairies. I watched a whole ton of prairie documentaries prior to doing this, and all of them are just very folksy, very, yeah, white American sort of like home on the range stuff. And personally, I grew up in Kansas. And I was like a rave kid in Kansas when I was a teenager. Like, so I was just, I don't know, I just didn't feel very represented. And I just also felt like the narrative of the music in most prairie documentaries was just very one note, very much like only applicable towards like one group. And so when I came to Edith about prairies, I was just like, all I know is I don't want this. Like, I want, to have more diversity in the music. I don't want it to feel like we are saying that the prairies is just one note and one vibe. And if you don't jive with that, one note, then like that's, then it's not for you. So, and so I think that's what really made it such a challenge. I was giving Edith the challenge kind of because my vision was just like what not to do, but we needed to definitely like explore together on like, okay, then what does that mean? And how diverse do we go? And how different do we go? So it's like, we have a lot of beautiful, orchestral stuff, but we also have a lot of like really cool synth stuff. And I was just wanting to sort of break the prairies out of its little box that it had been put in. But it did mean that it may have been a little bit extra challenging to work with on prairies because I didn't have that explicit vision for what it was going to be. I just knew I wanted it to be different.
Yeah, I think also it's so hard in the beginning to know like, okay, this is the music that I like listening to, and is it going to fit in prairies as a nature documentary? And we did try more synthy, like rave kind of stuff, and it ended up in there in some places. Like we've got some space things. I would say the closest thing is probably the Fireflies cue, Fireflies having a little rave in the sky. But but I feel like we got a lot of different vibes in there. I'm very happy with how it turned out. So no regrets on my end for the open-ended direction.
Yeah, and I mean, to a certain extent, how lucky are we that all of us like electronic music, all of us like hybrid scores, and there's just a lot of, I think, aesthetic overlap that I don't think at all was planned. And I think that we just all kind of share a music vocabulary between us. And I think that all of us listen to different music for pleasure than one another. But there's, in this kind of three-way diagram, there's so much overlap in terms of just what we all like to hear that I think we just got really lucky finding each other on this project.
Yeah, that definitely. For me, like the turning point was in the first episode. Of course, I watched it. First of all, I was seeing Ariel, so I was trying to get to know her in this picture, and then of course I was expecting to keep my ear open for sound. But then the first time for me where really the music came out was in the first episode. The first zoom when you go into the bacterial world, and then the transfer out to the plane trip where it was suddenly there were guitars there, and I was like, oh, this is not just like a little bit of orchestra music, like just an orchestrated piece of documentary as you are used to, but this is like a real journey. And that's where I then like immediately it really, while I was trying to focus on sound, like the music demanded my attention. I was like, oh, that is nice. So I've also heard that there was a lot of recording for that. So, Edith, I'd like to know, like, could you tell a little bit about like the live musicians recorded for that and how that went? Because it sounds amazing.
I have to shout out Wayne Ingram, who played the guitars on this. I spent a couple of days at his house, and he's a composer and touring metal guitarist, and he's got just so many pedals and sounds and effects and guitars. And so we were just sitting at his house, like playing around and saying, how does this sound? Oh, that's kind of cool. Let's turn this knob a little bit. Like, yeah, so that was a very playful part of the process. That was a really good time. We also recorded several times in North Macedonia remotely. And I had a wonderful group of colleagues who were helping me orchestrate for that and prepare everything for the session. We got Adele Etheridge-Woodson to provide violin for the Antarctica section. Who else do I need to shout out? I mean, we did a lot of recording. We had a wind quartet, a string quartet, multiple sessions of a string orchestra. So, I mean, it just brought it to life. Oh my gosh, Brian Taylor is my score mixer, and he did an incredible job with mixing all the live recordings together with my samples and making it sound like a real score. So very grateful. I had a wonderful team on my end.
And maybe to you as well, Nathan, you've mentioned to me that especially episodes 4 to 6, the prairies ones, had a lot more field recording material. I think you told me like 4.5 hours of sound library material, which is like amazing for that kind of footage. So could you tell me a bit more about that?
Sure. That 4.5 hours of show library originally was 100 hours of recording. And turns out when you're trying to be authentic and true to a location, you have to also deal with whatever curveballs that location throws at you, such as being a 2-hour drive away from O'Hare International Airport, such as being a 45-minute drive from an air freight hub. So that's why in film, there's a term called shooting ratio. And this is especially important for documentaries. They usually have a very high shooting ratio of captured footage to edited footage. And so that's why I've got almost a 100 to 1 ratio almost. Because if you open it up in a spectrogram and you see that low arcing graphics, it's like, that's an airplane. Just remove that whole section. We're not even going to try to noise reduce it or move it. Just get rid of it. So to a certain extent, you have to, edit around some of those noise intrusions. But that's also part of the story of that prairie location, is that farm roads crisscross it. This whole 4,000 acre restored prairie that is a nature conservancy site in northern Illinois is 4,000 acres, but it's surrounded by roads, and that's part of its stories. It all used to be cornfields, and there was one, I believe, true plot of remnant prairie that was never developed, and just they keep restoring more and more and more of it as farmers are willing to sell their land. So that in and of itself is also kind of part of the story of the prairies. So to a certain extent, it might not have made the final cut, but from a recording standpoint, it made me really cognizant of what had come before in truly ancient times and what had come before in more modern times. And the sonic impact of humans on that landscape in the near term was pretty crazy. There was one road where literally, if I point my mics in one direction, it's like the loudest dawn chorus you could possibly imagine, just incredibly dense. Literally cross the road, pivot the mics the other way, and point them at a cornfield, and it's like an acoustic desert. And so coming back with those contrasts is a big part of what made this such an impactful project for me personally to work on.
Yeah, and those locations that we filmed at for prairies. So the location that Nathan's referring to is the Nachusa grasslands in northern Illinois, and managed by the Nature Conservancy. And it's just a really special place. And one of the things that motivated Nathan to come out and field record there was the fact that not a lot of people know about it, and there wasn't a known audio library specifically dedicated to Nachusa. And so, it was a wonderful way to begin filling in the gaps also of for conservation purposes, for, biodiversity purposes, and being able to then share those audio recordings back with the researchers and the people who managed the site was really special. You saw people like tear up, you saw people like meditating to it. Like it was a really special thing, irregardless of even the film project, of being able to provide that to the people who manage that land was really special. And then the other location that we filmed in, that we didn't do field recordings at, but it was the Kanza Prairie in Kansas. And that's also a nature conservancy site, but managed by Kansas State University.
Yeah, that's really beautiful that you've mentioned that. That's something that I always also like, that kind of feeling afterwards, that you've now just captured this moment in time of this very, very beautiful location. But also, like you said, Nathan, like this visiting of the place is also important for you as a sound designer to really make informed decisions later in the project. I've learned that a while ago when I had my first game project was from a now friend of mine who's in Slovenia. And so at first I was like, okay, it's an RPG game, it plays in the forest, so you're going to have some birds. So I recorded some local birds. But at some point, because were becoming friends, I was like, hey, let me just visit you and take my recording equipment with you, because I want to like record your nature, because it's your game and your vision and it's like your thing. And then with him, like just hiking through nature and hearing the slight differences in how it sounds I have the Bavarian forest, which is beautiful and has sometimes, when planes are not around and when you're very late or very early morning, you can hear just pristine nature sounds, but it sounds totally different than his place. And it's just like 10 hours of drive away, which is not that much in Earth space, but it's so different. Like the frogs were different, the time of days were different, and I've recorded like the most amazing dawn chorus. It was so loud that my peaks were just all up. I didn't expect that coming in. And hearing that then made me like make better decisions of the project as well. What should I put in there? How frequent should the sounds be and stuff like that? So yeah, I think that's always for sound designers or for recorders, immersing yourself in a place is really even more important than recording that specific place, because you need to feel how it feels to be there, how nature is feeling, how it's reacting to you, and how it is at certain times of day.
While I couldn't agree more, I'm also not super sad I didn't have to go to Antarctica.
Why not, man? It's so beautiful.
I know. And my final shout out is to George Vlad and Thomas Rex Beverly, who contributed a bunch of recordings, especially for those first 3 episodes, because as probably most of your listeners know, wind doesn't make sound. Wind only excites things that it's moving through, and that's what you hear. So trying to find a large library of wind sound with no foliage of any kind, harder than you think. Yeah. And so a lot of the winds that we hear in the first 3 episodes are actually recorded at the Atacama Desert in the Andes in South America. Really brutal winds, but going through nothing but rock, pebble, and sand. George Vlad recorded that, and he's one of the world's best nature recordists. And so it was a real thrill to be able to use a lot of his work in this show.
Yeah, and maybe coming to an end slowly, one question that I wanted to ask you, Ariel, as well. What is your word of advice for fellow filmmakers regarding sound?
I mean, for recording sound, well, I don't know. I mean, my advice is to find an excellent sound person and an excellent music person. And so again, I'm just really, really fortunate. I'm not going to be able to do on my, I do a whole lot on my own, but 2 very specific things I do not do are the music and the sound. And there's good reason for that. And so finding someone, I mean, even if they're early in their career, so you're a filmmaker, you're scrappy, you're like, oh, but I don't have money for sound and music. Find sound and music people like you who are, maybe early in their journey. But the main thing is finding people who are just obsessed with what they do, and so you get to geek out with them. And so if you can find people that you can collaborate with who just are obsessed with sound, obsessed with music, and Nathan and Edith are, that's the best thing you can do, and so to me, one of the most important things is it's not even necessarily about making sure you get someone with the most badass skills or something. It's getting people who are really excited to dive into things, try things out, and who are not just going to be people who are like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it sort of people, but people who are like, hey, I had this cool idea. What if we added this in? And what if we did this? I feel like that's my main piece of advice more than recording on your own. Like recording on your own is helpful to do as reference for the people that you work with, but ultimately finding people to team up with is the most important thing.
That's wonderful. Then that's for me all the questions I wanted to ask so far. So any shout outs from you to future projects or to anyone you didn't mention so far? Feel free, the floor is yours.
Life Unearthed with Ariel Waldman can be seen on PBS. So that's PBS Broadcast, PBS Streaming on the PBS app. It's also available on Apple TV and Amazon. That's available in the US and Canada. I am looking for international distributors should anyone want to get in touch. But yeah, the first episode at least is available on the PBS YouTube channel internationally. So you can watch that first episode about Antarctica on YouTube.
Perfect. Thank you all for being on the show. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Looking for more audio-related podcasts to listen to? We're part of the Audio Podcast Alliance, featuring a hand-picked selection of the very best podcasts about sound. Be sure to hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting on patreon.com/fieldandfoley or ko-fi.com/fieldandfoley, where you gain early access to episodes in lossless format and can submit questions for our guests. Thank you for listening.